Lighting can single-handedly make or break your films. Good lighting can effectively sell the mood or emotion you're wanting your audience to feel. Bad lighting can detach the viewer from the film simply because it doesn't look realistic. What's going on, guys, and welcome to the ZooLab channel. My name is Vinny Signs, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 10 most common lighting mistakes. Now, this isn't just for beginners, but also for experienced filmmakers and gaffers looking to add something new to their repertoire. Here at ZooLab, we have over 20 plus combined years of experience conducting and filming countless interviews, talking heads, podcasts, and documentaries, all varying in different levels of lighting complexities and needs. Whether it's run and gun or a commercial set, we have firsthand experience in each one of the common mistakes we will discuss in this video. Okay, common mistake number 1, lighting for faces, not spaces. In other words, paying too much attention to lighting your subject and not the background. This is something I struggled with for so long, simply due to lack of awareness and know-how. In any naturalistic setting, you either have a large amount of sunlight spilling into the room, or house lights on, a lamp, the TV on. Typically, there's some kind of practical or ambient light in the background. So in order to recreate this in your scenes, you have to be intentional about it. Sometimes it's as easy as just putting a light outside of the window in the scene, creating an artificial sunlight. Or you can also flick on a lamp or add a practical light like a tube light or light bulbs or even small LED lights that you can hide in bookshelves or on the floor. One of the most common tools we use for this concept is a spotlight mount. You can easily add slashes and textures to the background to elevate the lighting in your scenes. We have a whole video breaking down our favorite spotlight mount. In case you're unaware of spotlight mounts, I suggest you give that a watch to get an even better understanding of lighting for spaces, not just faces. Okay, next common mistake I see filmmakers make is not understanding the purposes of soft light versus hard light. Remember, lighting is secondary to the story or mood you're trying to evoke. If the scene is bright and airy, then the lighting should be soft. If the scene is by a window, then maybe there's a hard sunlight hitting your subject's face. In order to execute whether you want soft or hard light on your subject requires you to really understand your gear. Understanding your gear will also make you faster in your lighting setups. There are 2 different types of lights, a point source light and a panel light. Point source lights are typically more powerful, harder sources of light, and panel lights are softer, less powerful lights. Point source lights have more flexibility, in my opinion, because you can use it as a hard source or you can soften it by using a softbox or diffusion rags. Panel lights are commonly used to light backdrops, top-down scenes, or simply used as an easy key light since they're already fairly soft. Let's continue the soft versus hard light discussion with the next common mistake, not understanding light distance. To create a soft light, you want your light source as close to the subject as possible. If you want a hard light, you want your source farther away from your subject. For example, let's start with lighting our space before we light our face. If you want to create a naturalistic sunlight coming through the windows, then ideally you would want your light outside to be a point source light. Add a reflector dish or a Fresnel to control spill, and walk it as far back as you can from your window to create distance between your space and the light source to create a natural looking sunlight. Now, sometimes this isn't realistic if you don't have a ton of space, so just walk it back as far as you can. Now that we have the space lit the way we want, let's light for our face. For hard light, you want distance, but for soft light, you want your light source as close to your subject as possible. You not only want your source to be close, but to be large as well. And you can simply achieve that by tossing your light into a softbox, or by bouncing your light, or you can blast it through a larger diffusion frame. Common mistake number 4 is overexposed skin tones. The best tool to use to avoid this is false color. Now, most mirrorless cameras don't have false color, but there are other tools to help you avoid overexposing skin tones, like using zebras or a histogram. If you have a capable camera or an external monitor that has false color, here's what to look for. Essentially, you want your skin tone to fall into the green zone. With lighter complected skin tones, you might see a bit of yellow in the skin, which is totally fine. You really just want to avoid orange or red, which means your skin tone is overexposed, or blue or purple, which means your skin is underexposed. Or if you're using zebras, then simply avoid any zebras in your skin tones. All right, common mistake number 5, always buying cheap. I'm sure you've heard the saying, buy once, cry once. I ran into this issue later on in my career when I started working on bigger sets and situations that required faster and more efficient setups. What I mean by that is, for example, when I first started out, I obviously didn't have a ton of budget to work with, like I'm sure a lot of you guys are experiencing now. So I went for the cheapest light I could find. I picked up a Godox SL60 and a parabolic softbox. While the softbox has held up over time, the light has since broke, meaning I had to ultimately spend more money buying additional lights after the cheaper light couldn't handle the rigorous life of being on set. And on set, we use Aperture and Amaran lighting products that all work seamlessly together on an app. So after buying a few older Godox lights, mainly because they were cheaper, kind of made me less efficient because I couldn't control them on one single app, and ultimately spent more money to replace the broken, cheaper made lights. It's even more important to not buy cheap light stands or grip equipment. Safety is priority number one when lighting a set, and if you cheaped out on your stands or not getting the proper grip equipment, then you risk potentially hurting someone. Maybe having to flee the country, then we're talking about a different situation. Just kidding. Hopefully it doesn't go that far. But nonetheless, make sure to not cheap out on proper light stands, boom arms, purchasing sandbags and grip equipment that will add more safety to your lighting setup. You can never be too careful. Common lighting mistake number 6, lighting for want versus lighting for need. Ooh, this one hits some nerves. You're like, nah, man, it's what I want. If the client doesn't like my style, then they can hire someone else. And there may be some truth to that, meaning, yeah, we don't want to work with people that don't honor and value us. But as far as your look and style, you'll learn fairly quickly that this must be something that you hold on to loosely. Remember, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the client. And I'm not saying this to take shots at anyone. This is from personal experience. As someone that takes a lot of pride in my work, I've fallen into situations where the set is ready, it's perfect, it's moody, tons of depth. Then the client takes a peek at the monitor and they say, hey, it's a little bit dark. Could we brighten it up a little bit? And I have two choices. I could either slap them or, just kidding, don't slap the client. I usually feel eager for the challenge or offended. And it takes a lot of work to flip that mindset from offended to challenged. And instead of taking extreme pride in your preferred look, you start taking pride in giving a challenge and crushing it. And in those instances where you find that perfect client that preferred your creativity and style, then cherry on top sounds like an easy project. It doesn't have to be as drastic as wanting to slap your client. Sometimes you have the interview or scene set up and ready to go. The client takes a peek at the monitor and gives the thumbs up. But internally we feel, it's not right. It's not perfect. There's another light we can add, or we can soften the key a bit. And there's that fine dance between honoring the client by making those small changes that elevate the scene and trying too much to where it leads to delays on set. So a good rule of thumb is if the client gives the okay, don't touch it anymore. Another common mistake is adding light but not taking light away. The best way to take light away is by using negative fill. If you're looking for a moody scene with a lot of contrast, then using negative fill is a must. Let's say, for example, you have a well-lit scene and you've since cleaned up the mistakes mentioned in this video above. You lit your space properly, your key is large and close to your subject, your skin tones are properly exposed, but there's just something missing. And typically it's as simple as adding in a negative fill, opposite of your key light, to add some contrast to your subject's face. Other times there's just lots of ambient light spilling onto your scene. Tossing up some black tablecloths or duvetine can go a long way in shaping and adding dimension to your scene. All right, mistake number 8 is overexposed highlights. A dead giveaway to an amateur film is blown out highlights. This is step number 1 when setting up a scene, is to control your highlights. Remember, your viewer's attention will draw to the brightest part of the scene, and typically you want that to be your subject. So a good rule of thumb is when setting up a scene is to first add in D or drop your camera's ISO to bring the exposure down on the highlights in your frame. Then we bring in our own lighting to compensate for the loss of exposure in the room. And on the opposite end, mistake number 9 is not having enough light or exposure in your scene. Using false color will certainly help with this issue. Another great tool to help with exposing correctly is a histogram. On the left is your shadows and on the right is your highlights. And a good rule of thumb is to expose to the right, or otherwise referred to as ETTR. Sometimes just adding a tube light or a small LED light can be useful when shooting into rooms with dark pockets. It's usually recommended to expose a touch brighter, as you can bring it down in post, as opposed to shooting too low in exposure and adding a ton of noise and artifacts when trying to recover that in post. And the final, most common mistake is not having enough background separation. So start by placing your subject a few feet from your background, then toss up an edge light or a hair light to better separate your subject from the background. Another way to achieve this is by adding interest in the background, like an RGB light in the back room or a slash on the back wall. Creating more separation between the subject and the background further enhances your look and creates a more polished, professional overall film. Hey, hopefully this video helps elevate your lighting game and gives a tip or two to those experienced filmmakers out there. If it did, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you've been here for a while and been on the fence, hey, show us some love and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future videos. We appreciate you guys a ton, and we'll see you in the next one.